do open forum with Jimmy Akin. So those of you who have to get your weekly open forum Jimmy Akin fix in, you're going to get it in the second hour. First hour, we're going to talk a bit about sacred architecture. We're going to talk about the architecture of our churches and our sacred spaces in the Catholic world and in the wider world. Are we doing well? Are we doing poorly? Particularly, are there some positive trends we can point to and maybe even foster those positive trends? If you want to call and ask about that, maybe you're considering doing some things at your parish. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884, and you get to talk with one of the finest architects now working, Duncan Stroik from Notre Dame University. Thank you, Duncan, for being here with us.
What do you mean, finest architects? I'm just a little professor of architecture.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to alarm you or upset you by with that. But around here, a very popular building is one that you made. It's called the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and it's a beautiful work. And we've gotten to speak with you about that before, but it's. Okay, I guess the question that I want to ask you is the beauty of that building, which has a certain kind of traditional quality to it. Is it a beauty that we're rediscovering, or are we still hopelessly lost when it comes to the building of our churches?
Oh, I like that question, Cy.
Okay.
Yes.
It took me long enough to get it out. I'm glad you like it.
No, I like it a lot because it is rediscovering, and I think of it a little bit like tearing down the walls of a city. We did that for 50, 80 years. Now we're rebuilding the walls, and we're relearning how to do sacred architecture and sacred art. And it's not easy because we forgot for 50 years, but it is happening, and it seems like that's what the faithful want.
It certainly does seem like that's what the faithful want. There's, a very common thing that we will hear from people is, why don't our churches look like churches, or why can't I have a church that looks like a church? And so, I think that's a shorthand for something. What do you think it's a shorthand for? What is it that people are looking for?
Yeah, Catholics have a liturgical sense. They have a sacramental sense. And even if they're not people that focus on art or architecture, they can tell. And it may be their house, it may be the office, could be one way. But when it comes to it's the house of God, maybe it should be something bigger and better.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there's not a willingness to settle, maybe, in the way that there was.
I think that's the key, and that's why the Catholics are the leaders in traditional architecture today in churches. The Protestants generally have given up that interest and have become very focused on other things, which may be good, but the Catholics still have that incarnational sense that we're celebrating a liturgy and we're celebrating God. And so if it's God's house, it should be beautiful. If it's just our house, we can make it functional.
Right. Again, the number 888-318-7884. We're talking about positive trends in sacred architecture with Duncan Stroik from Notre Dame University. Certainly, there are branches of Christianity, and it does seem to me that what's often called non-denominational churches, sometimes you hear the word megachurch. Yeah. There really is. It almost seems like a self-conscious rejection of a beautiful building. Yes. That the building is entirely functional.
Yes.
I'm thinking of the TV preacher that you see every Sunday. He's probably the biggest preacher in America right now, and it's a basketball arena.
Yes.
His church is a basketball arena that was converted, and you go, converted? Doesn't look very converted.
No.
It just looks the same as it looked.
Right.
I'm thinking of here in Southern California, we have lots of the Calvary Chapel.
Yes.
And not saying anything against Calvary Chapel people. Greatest people you'll ever meet. You'd be so happy when they're your neighbor.
Yes.
But those are really almost aggressively not beautiful buildings.
That's right.
Very utilitarian.
And unfortunately, we Catholics accepted that or bought into that for 50, 60 years. I think mainly because our church is very hierarchical, and the hierarchy thought that to be modern, they needed to embrace minimalism, and they did. And after 50 years, people said, we don't really like this. It didn't turn out very well. Let's tear those down. And so we're seeing a resurgence of love and appreciation for tradition.
And I think that will then make us distinctive in a way too. That our distinctiveness as Catholics, because another thing that is very, very common among Christians around the world, even among Catholics, is it doesn't matter so much what church you worship in. It's that we all love Jesus. Well,
Yes.
It does actually matter what church that you worship in.
Yes, and if there's many things that go into Catholicism or Christianity, but insofar as liturgy can help us, it should. Insofar as music can help us to worship God, it should. And insofar as architecture, which is probably the biggest outlay of funds that we make, and it's a very permanent investment, it should. It should help us in our faith. It should help us in our catechism. It should help us in our evangelism. And we haven't been doing that for 50 years. We're starting to do that again.
888-318-7884. So the building is for, certainly it has a function for us as the Catholic community. There are these things that we do, and it should be this beautiful place to do those sacred things. But it also has a purpose beyond us. And so what it looks like in the neighborhood is important as well.
Yes, I love that. That our neighborliness in our buildings can speak of and should speak of transcendence. It should say this is a place that's other. It's not just a normal shopping center or office building like many of the mega churches think of, but it's something sacred, something that you have to actually dress up to go to be quiet to go into. There's a sense of the holy because it's God's house.
Again, calls are coming in, but there are still a couple lines open. 888-318-7884 is actually something that lots of people love to talk with us about. And so now we finally have somebody here qualified to really answer your questions. If you want to talk about sacred architecture, 888-318-7884. You mentioned music. I was going to make the joke that we were going to do a positive trends in sacred music show, but we couldn't find any. But that's not really true either. There are in music as well. There's you think of. I think most people would think of Avro Parrott and his magnificent music. It really does say there's the possibility of recovery.
Yes.
But it's not just an act of recovery, is it? Like when you think of his music, it's also an act of doing something that even Mozart didn't do. It never was done before. So is that also true in sacred architecture?
And I think that's what all artists desire to do, but it can only be I can really only do something new that's beautiful and harmonious and true if I know the tradition very well. And if I don't know the tradition very well, I'll do something new looking and it won't be. It'll fall flat on its face. It will be go out of style. So that's the one caveat. But all the great artists and music composers have done that. They've given us something new that can be fully embrace the tradition, and that's what we have to relearn.
So it's almost a magic that you have to do of just gathering strands from a past, and not just saying here's those same old things again, but making something out of them that's beautiful for this moment, this place, these people.
Yes, definitely. And so the great buildings that are being built today and that have been built in the past are really a collaboration with many people, but especially the pastor or the bishop who has the vision for that. Something traditional, but something you could say unique or beautiful, and the architect who wants to do the same thing. And working together, they can do it. Architect can't do it on his own. The bishop or the priest cannot do it on their own. It needs to be a collaboration.
888-318-7884. We have to take our first break. We have lots of folks on the line to talk with our guest, Duncan Stroig. When we come back, I want to ask you about just a little bit about what you see as far as the art that goes into our churches, not just the church structure itself, but the art that goes into it, and then we'll let our callers have at you. How's that?
Great. Thank you, Si.
All right, right back with more Duncan Stroig on sacred architecture on Catholic Answers Live.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Faith is a precious gift from God. As the largest religious media network in the world, EWTN has an important role in educating others about our Catholic faith and spreading the good news of salvation. We invite you to explore our numerous pages of historical faith documents, prayers, teachings, and other current issues in Catholicism today. Visit EWTN.com and click Catholicism. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It really is a great privilege to have Duncan Stroik here with us, one of the leaders among, but certainly not the lone voice among those who would like to see a church look like a church, not in some trite or sentimental way, but that churches really express beauty. And that churches really mean something to the community that celebrates there. You're welcome to call with your questions, 888-318-7884. We're nothing if not demanding when you come around this building. So we're making you work an hour now after you just worked an hour with us before recording a focus program. But between the two, your wife Ruth was mentioning, and I wanted to ask you on air about artists, those who are doing, we just so people know, the focus episode that we recorded earlier that'll come out in a few weeks was about St. Peter's in Rome.
Yes.
Well, St. Peter's is maybe the most magnificent building on earth,
yes,
but it's also a place where, foot by foot, inch by inch in some places, you're encountering some of the greatest artworks
yes,
in the history of the world. So what about art in our churches?
Yes, and I like your point about St. Peter's because our goal as Catholics, whatever our budget is, whether it's $2 million or $10 million, $50 million or $100 million, it should be excellence. And it should be also to foster the arts and so to hire quality architects and artists, not necessarily secular people, but people in the tradition, and to promote that the church could again be the patroness of the arts, as she was before, leading the way and letting the secular world catch up to us instead of us trying to follow the coattails of the secular world, which is what we've been doing for the last 70 years.
Are there good artists doing sacred art now? Are there people who you'd say, yeah, I'd trust you to that person to go?
Definitely, yes. Yeah. And we, as architects, we try to only use original art in our projects. And so you mentioned the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Wisconsin. Everything is original art, sculpture. It's actually a little bit of a museum of sacred art. That is, we have probably 20 different artists working there, sculptors and painters and mosaics. And I do believe in all of the mediums, mosaic and bas-relief and fresco painting, and it's all good. We have a couple of people that I really rely on a lot is our Tony Visco in Philadelphia, who is a great mentor and teacher of Catholic artists, and he has a school there. He has a friend in Florence, Cody Swanson, who's a sculptor and is part of the Sacred Art School in Florence, Italy. He's an American. There's a wonderful Spanish painter that we did a recent Jesuit chapel in Tampa with, Raul Berzosa, and he really paints in a Baroque Spanish way that was perfect for the Jesuits. And he's doing, right now he's doing the first new traditional church in Guatemala. He's doing the paintings there. We've worked with Leonard Porter out of New York and numerous other painters and sculptors. The other thing I want to say is there's a lot of historic stained glass on the market that you can get for a good price, but you have to restore it and you have to cut it down. Sometimes you could be damaging the original intent of the art, and it may not be exactly what you want. So we've had a lot of great success doing new stained glass. I say a lot of success. We've had some success, including in Tampa, some of the largest modern, recent stained glass windows in the country, with Conrad Schmidt out of Milwaukee. And so I think there's a lot of good people out there, but you have to, in hiring these people or hiring the right people, then you also need to keep the bar high. That means spending money. So I believe in not if you have to decide quantity or quality, I'd rather go with quality. I'd rather have less art in my church and have it really high quality. I'd rather have a few nice, beautiful materials than put medium materials throughout it. So we always do marble at the high altar. We make the tabernacle out of bronze or marble. We don't go cheap on the important stuff. If we have to go cheap on the bathrooms and the foyer, it's fine. It's not a problem. The front door needs to be expensive because everybody sees it and walks through there. And that's another place where maybe you have a statue of the titular, or the saint that the church is named after, or some inscription over the front door or what have you.
Yeah.
So I think we need the church to become a patroness of the arts again.
This is something that I think Catholics are out of the habit of, because in America there's plenty of very wealthy Catholics. We're not
Yes.
short of wealthy
No.
Catholics. So I do want to get to the calls, but I want to. This is really important to me, so I want to ask you. So I'm a wealthy Catholic who says, you know what, I'd like to be like some of those Renaissance Florentine Catholics, and I'd like to be a patron of an artist or of art. How would they go about doing it? What would they do?
I love that idea. And really, most of the great churches of the world, the side chapels or the high altar were usually paid for by one family. And you would have the right to have Mass said there for your family and maybe even be buried there. So there's a real incentive to do it well. Sometimes they could have say over the artist. Sometimes they couldn't. Maybe the community, the Franciscans or the Jesuits said, no, this is going to be a chapel to the Immaculate Conception. That's what we're going to do. And you would pay for that or not. So today, I think there's a lot of room for patrons to say, I want to be involved. And if you're interested in a particular part of the church, to donate to that and to participate in that, even participate in seeing as the artist unfolds the designs for the altarpiece or the statuary or the fresco on the ceiling, and to be part of that. And that's very exciting, actually, for an architect to have that relationship with the client. Oh yeah, to me that's what makes great art. The modern artist likes to create art and then put it in a gallery and sell it. The classical artist likes to meet the client and they ask them to do something for them, and then you work together to come up with the right story that would be appropriate for your chapel or your church or your house or whatever.
You can see how that's so much more Catholic than modern. The Catholic way of collaboration, of community. We do these things together.
Yeah, and it means a little bit of humility on the artist's side, but believe me, this is how Michelangelo did everything. Everything he did had to be done for a patron. He didn't just go and create Jesus dead in his mother's arms and then sell it. No, he had a cardinal who asked him to do that.
And he was good? He was a good artist?
He was pretty good.
Okay, all right. Just confirming that with you. Let's go to St. Augustine, Florida, watching on YouTube. Gregory, you're starting us off. Go ahead with your question for our guest, Duncan Stroik.
Hey, good evening. I was calling. I was fascinated when they turned the old Crystal Cathedral out in Grove Park, California, into a glorious cathedral now, and I was just wondering what type of transformations had to be made to make that space into a Catholic space.
Oh, yeah. That's now Christ Cathedral for the Catholic Diocese of Orange. It used to be those who... Fuller, right? It was Reverend... now I'm forgetting. I'm forgetting the
Schuller.
Schuller. Oh yeah, Schuller.
Yeah,
Yeah, right. Who you used to see on TV all the time, and he was a great figure here in Southern California. But actually, the church was sold, and the property was sold, and now it's becoming. I'm not sure if they're done with it yet, but it's becoming Christ Cathedral for the Diocese of Orange. Have you seen it? Do you know what they changed?
I have not seen it in person. I think it was a real challenge because that building is a glass building inspired by, let's say glass buildings, greenhouse type buildings. And it had a lot of very innovative things at the time, very much seating on multiple balconies and different views, and to try to give it a strong direction or a directionality was something they tried to do. There is a sanctuary created. There was a stage before. There is more of a directionality to it. And of course, fundamental thing for a Catholic Church is that there's a consecrated altar. The altar is Christ, should be out of stone. We have the bodies of the saints under it or within it, the relics. And then because of that altar and that which is Christ, we have him linger with us in his real presence in the Blessed Sacrament, and so we have a tabernacle. Those are kind of the fundamental things. Whenever you turn a building into a church, or whenever you build a building for a church, same concept. It needs to be blessed and consecrated, and the walls are anointed. And it's a little bit like baptizing a building or confirming a building all at once. And we do the same things to whether it's a renovation or a new building.
I know that the focal point was where the preacher would preach, and then
Yes.
right behind him a gigantic organ.
Yes.
And in a Catholic church, it really wouldn't be appropriate to have the organ be the focal point. So I don't know where they moved it, but I know they moved it.
Yeah, and they've kept the organs, and that was one of the things that really drew them to it, to that building. But it was a very hard project to do, and I know that a number of architects were interviewed about it, and it's not everyone is pleased with the design. But again, it was a hard project to turn a modernist Protestant megachurch. It's really one of the early megachurches.
Yeah, right.
Really, we're talking about megachurches today. It's really an early Protestant megachurch. Turn that into a Catholic cathedral. It's not a normal thing to do.
No, one of the things that Reverend Schuler pioneered was the drive-in church. And so you can still, the parking lot is still shaped like a drive-in.
Yes.
over on one side of the building. And it's like a drive-in movie theater,
Yes.
where they used to have the little speaker that you would hang on the window of your car.
And I think he was laughing during COVID because
then everyone needed it.
Even the Catholics were doing drive-in masses.
That's
yeah,
probably
he
right.
was just really loving it.
Gregory, thanks. I'm going to keep moving because there's lots of folks that'd like to talk with our guest, Duncan Stroik. Let's go to Kurt in Boston, listening on the Station of the Cross. Kurt, thank you so much for your call. Go ahead with your question for Duncan Stroik.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I was a Protestant, and when I came into the Catholic Church, of course, being a Protestant, I didn't know really what was going on. So when I would go into the church, I wanted to learn more because I'd see the Stations of the Cross and the way everything is set up. And I was Episcopalian. Now, it's ironic because this kind of goes with the art, you know, when you have the sacrifice of the Mass and then you had the worship service of Episcopalianism, it tried to imitate the Mass. Well, in reality, as I learned, you know, you have a consecration, you have a valid priest, and I think all these things, the center point of the church has to be the main altar. It has to be Christ. And I think the art should represent that. And I've noticed, well, I came into the church in the early 90s, but when I go to the traditional Latin Mass, I'm noticing how, wow, now this is Catholic. And I say that because I could see the total break from Protestantism, because all 7 sacraments are visible. And I think the art should represent that in a very beautiful form, because it draws the attention from as you enter the church to the altar, because it's all about the sacrifice of the Mass.
Kurt, I'm going to let Duncan respond to that because it's extraordinary what Kurt's saying. What do you make of that?
I love what you're saying, Kurt. And so a couple of things I'm thinking about. One is the building itself teaches, and the building catechizes, at least in your experience. And I've heard that from many people that a beautiful Catholic church can really draw them. There's something more there. I remember my wife saying, this has something here that I didn't find in other Protestant churches, and that was the real presence. And so the building should teach, the art should inspire, and I think that's, and it points, you're saying, it points to the sacrifice of the Mass, points to the altar, and that is one of the, I say there's 5 points of sacred architecture. One of them is directionality. And directionality means that there's an ending or a focus. It needs a focus, and that is Christ in the altar, in the Blessed Sacrament. He's many places, but it's a focus on Christ, and that's why we go.
Kurt, it seems like you found in an experiential way what as an architect, Duncan Stroik has kind of elaborated in language. But that makes sense to you, that sense of directionality?
Well, yes. I mean, the thing is you don't want to have a horizontal plane. You want to have something that lifts your whole being upward.
Did you take
And
his class at
because-
Notre Dame? Kurt, did you take Duncan Stroik's class at Notre Dame? You sound like him.
No, I did not take. No, I had to learn the faith. My wife taught me the Hail Mary, but I mean, I'm telling you, everything is transcendent. I mean,
Yes.
we were made to get to heaven. Everything has to point upward.
Kurt, thank you so much. Perfect to head into the break with those words. We'll be right back with lots more questions for Duncan Stroik. We're talking about positive trends in sacred architecture in the Catholic Church.
Catholic Answers Live.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Catholic Answers is doing it again. We're holding our 7th annual Apologetics Conference this September in beautiful San Diego, California, and we'd like to see you there. Join us September 23rd to 26th for a lively and inspiring conference with an all-star lineup of speakers guaranteed to jumpstart your faith. It's a great chance to meet all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and very special guests as we spend 4 days talking about worshiping and adoring our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This is where it all begins. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us this September for a conference that is sure to ignite, inspire, and inform your faith. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register.
Hi, this is Janet Williams. You don't have to be a woman to enjoy Women of Grace tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern here on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. What a great Thursday we're having. Second hour, Jimmy will be here we'll do open forum. So if you've got an open forum question, I know we had an 8-year-old young lady called yesterday and we told her to call back today. So I hope she'll call. If you're 8 years old, you're going to the front of the line if you called yesterday. I promise. We wanted to make sure we got to your call. But this hour, we have the great privilege of talking with Duncan Stroik, who made a terrible mistake. He agreed to come out to the West Coast to do a talk for Chris Check. And if you do that, then you got to do 20 other things as well. One of them is the live radio program.
Yeah.
So
what a pleasure.
You won't make that mistake again.
Well, you probably will never have me on here again, but it's fun. I'm enjoying it.
True. Lots and lots of folks with questions. Let's see who else we got. We're talking about sacred architecture, by the way. There are 2 lines open and probably time to get to you if you want to call with your question, 888-318-7884. But let's go to the lines we have here. Ralph in Iowa, listening on 105.3 FM. Thank you for your call, Ralph. Go ahead with your question for Duncan Stroik.
Okay, Duncan, you're probably familiar with the concept in certain artistries. I know in American Indian artistry they put flaws in their tapestries and stuff like that, and there's a significance to it. And I'm not so sure in artistry in the Catholic Church. We have a church 150 years old or something like that. It's a beautiful in the dome, above the altar in the sanctuary. There's the 7 sacraments displayed. And I've looked through that stained glass windows intensely, and I found the flaw in that church in the stained glass window, and it happens to be right next to the middle one, which is the Eucharist.
Yeah.
And it's quite obvious when you see it. And I mean, it's the only piece of stained glass that is
Imperfect?
turned around, imperfect.
Okay.
And I give tours of the church, and people ask me that, and I says, well, I think I know why it is, but I really don't know why that's put in there, and especially maybe in a church.
All right, let's ask Duncan.
What's the mistake, Ralph, or the flaw?
It's a chalice, basically, and it says above it, Eucharist and stuff. And then the trim around it, on the outside edge, there are leaves that curve one direction, and that panel on the opposite side of it is totally upside down, and you can look at every stained glass window in that church and look at the borders and examine them, and every one is perfectly symmetrical, left to right. And this one, that one's upside down. I don't think the guy was having beer for lunch, what I mean?
All right, so
my sense is that we do have flaws in our churches, and I've met people that have flaws in their life. I don't have any, but no, I think
congratulations on that.
Yeah, I think it is kind of natural that we have flaws and we make mistakes, but the goal is to, in our architecture and our art and our stained glass, is to reflect, be perfect as your Heavenly Father is perfect. As much as possible, I think we're heading for perfection. We're not going to make it in this world, but we're trying to. And so you're right. Those are the kind of things that bother you and some of your friends. They bug me immensely when I see those things. But it is true that we have limitations, and our art and architecture sometimes show that. I don't think it's intentional, though. I think it's just we sometimes flip the stained glass backwards or forget to do it.
Ralph, thanks. I hope that was helpful to you. Thank you very, very much. We're going to go to Columbia, South Carolina now. Kirk in Columbia, listening on St. Peter's Radio. Go ahead, Kirk, with your question for Duncan Stroik.
Oh, good evening, gentlemen. Thank you. So we have a real opportunity here. We got a plot of land to start from scratch on an existing parish. It's a university parish, Thomas More. And we don't want to mess it up. It's right, has an opportunity to be a really visible witness to the university and the. So, kind of some general tips, maybe. For instance, the name is Thomas More. How do you integrate that into the architecture? Should it be tied to his time and architecture's time? And then another general question: what about naming rights and these plaques and so forth? How do you approach that, it seems? And then how do you pick a good architect that understands all this?
Wonderful, Kirk. Thank you.
Well, I agree with your last point. Very important that you find a good architect, a Catholic architect, to help you do this, and they will help guide you on some of this. Very exciting project. I'm a professor. I love education. I love Thomas More. He's a great patron saint of lawyers and of students, so it's a great name for a chapel at a college. And so my hat's off to you. A couple of quick things. If it's a church dedicated to Thomas More and for a college, why not think about the iconography, the imagery, as being specific to students and academics and Thomas More, and think about his life and how that could be portrayed. St. Charles Borromeo, the great bishop of Milan in the Renaissance, said you should always have a statue of the titular, or the name, the saint that the church is named after. And I always prefer to have that image in the sanctuary, the main image. So when you go into Thomas More, it's different than going to the Church of St. Luke or to St. Mary's. And so I think there should be a prominent image of Thomas More right in the sanctuary behind the altar. That's what I would do. Some kind of, I would think, and we've done a number of university chapels, this is a great opportunity to think about how you speak to students, how you speak to students today, and what kind of models that you give them. And that can be very helpful to think about. Maybe there are some great academic saints that you want to emphasize, or different vocations that you want to emphasize, different states in life that students in Columbia should be thinking about as they do that. And so it's a very exciting project, and I'm encouraging you to do the standard church that everybody else does. No, I want you to think about doing something very specific for Thomas More and for Columbia.
Very good. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you,
What
sir.
do you think about these plaques where people, they tend to get kind of out of control, honestly, and detract from the, I'm not sure really if the church has a policy on naming plaques. And
Yeah, we need to ask Pope Francis for a new
itself.
policy on that. No, we've done it all different ways. I don't have strong opinions. I do like putting the plaque in the lobby in the narthex, where you can label all the people who have donated. But we've also done names, small brass nameplates throughout the church, as long as they're kind of small and surreptitious. I think it's kind of nice. I have to admit, on the old stained glass windows, sometimes, church that I go to, St. Monica's, I walk by the stained glass and I see this family and that family donated the stained glass 100 years ago. I think about that family. And that was one of the reasons to put their names there, is that later generations would pray for them. So that works. And if it's done in good taste, I think that could be a good way for us to be connected to our forebears, our forefathers.
Well, thank you very much. Y'all have a good evening, gentlemen.
All right. God bless you and good luck while you undertake that important work. I'm going to keep going here because we got lots and lots of folks on the line. I appreciate that Kirk is, undertaking this effort to build a church and thinking in these terms, like how much should we worry about the namesake of the church, the patron of the church, Thomas More, and how much should we worry about it being a witness to the community? That's really important. I wonder if many churches think about that.
Especially in a college town, that would be likely to have a bigger impact.
Let's go to Joan, listening in Virginia on EWTN Channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Joan, we're delighted to have you. Go ahead with your question for Duncan Stroik.
Well, I was going to say I'm not 8 years old, but I'm old, so I appreciate you taking my call.
Okay.
I have a question about the golden mean. I have read that I don't know if you call it dimensions, but that's been used in the creation of church buildings or sacred architecture. I'm really curious about it because it's supposed to mimic what's in nature. And so I'd like to know more about that, and is it still being used? And the second part of my question is, if it is used, is it feasible to build a small space, a small private space, like say, for instance, on my farm, where I could use those dimensions?
Sure. Well, you certainly could do that. And of course, the golden mean is a proportional system, and it can be used in any dimensions you want. And this, it's hard to describe, but basically, the golden mean is if you take a square and you divide it into half, and then you take a compass and you take that half of the square and create an arc, you get a bigger rectangle. And the beauty of it is that rectangle, if you add a square to it, then it makes a bigger golden section. If you add a square to that, you get a bigger golden section. So it has this kind of spiraling idea that is very exciting to people and to architects. It is somewhere between a 2 to 3 proportion and a 3 to 4, somewhere in between there. Most people cannot distinguish the golden section proportion with a 2 to 3. So I'm a bit of a skeptic. I say, well, it's another nice rectangle. 2 to 3 is a good rectangle. 3 to 4 is a nice rectangle. You say golden section or golden mean is better. Okay, that's fine. But that's I don't know if we can prove that. Is it still being used? Modernist architects gave up a lot of things in the 20th century, and what they replaced it with, they gave up ornament, they gave up sculpture, they gave up the figure, they gave up transcendence, they gave up a lot of things. One of the things they replaced it with was the golden mean. So we've really promoted the golden mean during modernism. It's one of the few things you can hang your hat on with modernism. So there's a lot of interest in architects with the golden mean. I happen to be a skeptic about it. Again, it's a 2 to 3. It's somewhere between a 2 to 3 proportion, right? 2 squares by 3 squares, and 3 to 4. And you could certainly build that at your property and see what you think.
Okay, Joan?
Is there some place where I can see it visually? Is there is there a book resource or something that I could take a look at?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff online about the golden section and golden mean, and there's, I would say, if you read enough of it, you'll say this is very New Agey, and it's all over the place. And one person will say that it's the great temple of the Parthenon is golden section. Somebody else will say it's some other proportion. It's very hard to prove that a particular proportion is used in a particular building unless we can find the drawings of the architect, and he said that that's what he used. So it's very hard to go back and say at the Parthenon or the Pantheon or St. Peter's that they use these proportions, unless you can have a drawing where you can find that proportion inscribed. And you really can't find those proportions used in the Renaissance or the Baroque. It's a fairly recent, I don't want to say that the ancients didn't use it, but certainly we don't find it being clearly used until the 19th, basically the 19th and 20th century.
Joan, we got to go to our break, so thank you very, very much for the call. We're talking about positive trends in sacred architecture with Duncan Stroik of Notre Dame University. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with more calls.
Hello, this is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Keep your dial tuned to Catholic Answers Live.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Hey, this is Michael O'Neill, the Miracle Hunter. I'll be delving into the fascinating world of miracles and taking you on a hunt that explores the greatest mysteries and marvels of the Catholic Church. I'll be examining what constitutes a miracle, how miracles are investigated and approved, and the role they play in the lives of the faithful. We'll look at the miracles of the Gospels and early Christianity, considering the claims of the miraculous in our own modern age.
The Miracle Hunter, Saturday at 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. What a fun and lively conversation. And I do think it reflects the fact that, as you were saying at the beginning, our guest, by the way, Duncan Stroik, architect and professor of architecture at Notre Dame University, there is an awakening among the Catholic people, certainly, and maybe among Christian people more generally, of these buildings matter, this idea that they should be functional first and we'll worry about all that non-essential stuff like beauty later is wrong. It's just wrong. And I don't think we all have the language to say what needs to be done, but we all intuit that something needs to be done.
Yeah, good term, non-essential, good COVID term.
Yeah, right.
If you're non-essential, don't go to work. If you're non-essential,
yeah.
If the art and architecture is non-essential, don't worry about it.
Well, you said something to me earlier that I think bears repeating, if you wouldn't mind, about you said liturgy is wasteful. Liturgy is inefficient, is what you said.
Yeah. Yeah, to do things well, if you want to take your girlfriend out for dinner, you waste a lot of time. You don't just eat fast. You want to make it meaningful. And if you're going to ask her something important or you're going to do something for someone important, you make it take even longer. And the liturgy is the ultimate feast and the ultimate sacrifice, and we honor that. Can the architecture help to support that in the liturgy? And a liturgical architecture supports the liturgy, whether it's a half an hour daily mass or whether it's a 2-hour Easter vigil. And I believe that if you are going to a church and you go back to it multiple times, it needs to be able to, the building itself needs to continue to speak to you.
Yes.
Because you keep going back. So it's a little bit of a sermon in stone. The building and the artwork is a sermon in stone. Now, there could be a sermon, a daily sermon or weekly sermon that brings the scriptures alive. But the sermon in stone needs to bring truths alive that are timeless, that you can hear each time that you go.
Sonia in Atlanta, Georgia is next. Sonia, are you listening on the Quest?
Hello?
Oh, I saw you. Go ahead with your question. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I thought you might be listening on the Quest radio station.
I am listening to Quest
Oh,
Radio
yeah.
Station.
Oh, that's good, because we love that radio station. All right, go ahead, Sonia, with your question for Duncan.
Thank you so much. I'm an architect. I studied at Catholic University of America a long time ago, and I just love this topic. I just want to say thank you for discussing this today. I'm loving the discussion, and I wanted to. My favorite class back in school was Sacred Space. It was a joint theology and architecture course. And I'd love to know where I can read more about it. Have you written any books?
Well, that's great. It's great to hear from an architect and somebody passionate about sacred space and sacred architecture. Yes, and I have a lot of friends at Catholic U, so I'm glad to hear about that. So 2 things that I'd encourage you to consider, and I'd be happy to send you a copy. We publish a magazine called, I forget what the title is, Sacred Architecture. And we write about contemporary issues, historical issues, liturgical issues, and it comes out twice a year. Sacred Architecture, look at that, sacredarchitecture.org. If you can find my email address, just send me a note and I'll send you a free copy. And then there's lots of good books out there. There's some nice books by Dennis McNamara, Michael Rose, lots and lots of smart people, smarter than me. But I needed to make a lot of money, so I wrote one called The Church Building. I'm kidding. The Church Building is a Sacred Place. The church building is a sacred place. And that has kind of my theory all boiled down into one book. But the key is, really, it has lots of great images of historic and contemporary churches that are trying to exude the 5 points of architecture.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I will email you, and I will look for your book. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
and,
simply, thank you. Yeah, and simply for anybody listening, stroik@stroik.com if you want to email me, and if anybody wants a free copy of the magazine.
All right, Sonia, you got something for you got everybody a free gift. It was like an Oprah Winfrey show right now. We're just giving stuff.
Or a free car.
You get sacred architecture.
Or a free
you get
building.
sacred architecture.
Free tabernacle.
Free tabernacle.
Sure.
Wow.
Out of the best materials. Plastic. No.
Katie in Columbia, South Dakota, also listening to EWTN on channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Katie, go ahead with your question for Duncan Stroik.
Oh, I was kind of curious whether you've been following the renovations for Notre Dame in France after the fire. So are they staying true to the original design? And I know it's owned by France itself and not the church. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Yes, it was stolen by France. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not what you said. I beg your pardon.
No, that's a great question. And when I was reading it here online, I was wondering if you were asking me about renovations at where I come from, which is the University of Notre Dame, Fighting Irish. But you're asking about Notre Dame in Paris, which I think they stole their name from us. No, Our Lady. So no, it was a great debate after that terrible fire a couple of years ago, and the modernist leadership, President Macron and some of the other elites of France wanted to rebuild the great cathedral of Paris and one of the great cathedrals of the world, and put a modern mark, secular mark, I believe also. Make it out of steel, make it out of titanium, put some restaurants on the roof, put a swimming pool on the roof, anything that would confront or deny or abrogate the greatness of this church dedicated to the Virgin. So what's interesting is they're in control, and they have control of the money, but there are a few people speaking up against it, including the architect of Notre Dame, French architect, who's in charge of Notre Dame and other historic buildings, and he said they should rebuild it the way it was, exactly the way it was, which is really the spire, which fell into the building which was basically a 19th century spire. But the people rose up. And the French people of faith, of no faith, of agnostics, they want Notre Dame to be returned to the way it was, which isn't from 1250, but it's actually from 1840. They want it to be returned to 1840 because 1840 was beautiful, and it was. And so I'm very happy that they're going to do it. Now, that's not an easy task, so we're going to be covering it in our magazine. And if you're really interested in the subject, please send me a note, because we did a whole issue in Sacred Architecture on Notre Dame in Paris and all the debates and all the controversy. And it's very exciting that they've listened to the popular vote.
All right, Katie?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I'm really glad you asked the question, because I had no idea that they were thinking about putting a swimming pool on top of a
yeah, it would be better. I guess better heated
building
in the winter or something. I don't know. Makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, but it's funny because sometimes the wisdom of the common person is much greater than,
thank God.
The president of France.
Yeah.
Come on. But is it really hard? It's very complicated to... Would they use, for example, you said they want to use steel and all that, but would you have to use steel in a hidden way to rebuild this building, or could you build it in the materials that it was built in?
Well, that will be very interesting, what they're going to do, because Viollet-le-Duc, who rebuilt, Notre Dame was, you could say, had been renovated over the centuries, but the key was the French Revolution and afterwards really did a lot of destruction. They went and cut off all the heads of the statues on the outside. They destroyed some of the sanctuary. They painted over things. And Viollet-le-Duc came in and redid all of that, but then more so, including this great spire that he built in the 19th century, which includes the 12 apostles on it. And including one that is Thomas, who's a patron of architects. And somebody made Thomas look a little bit like Viollet-le-Duc. Now, that's up in the spire, that's up in the air. And the goal of the architect of Notre Dame and the preservationist is to rebuild it the way it was, as close as possible. But taking into consideration some things, they may add some little steel plates here and there.
Yeah.
But it's a very fancy wooden building. In fact, one of the reasons to rebuild it the way it was is it's one of the early complex wooden roofs above the stone ceiling, a very complex wood roof that spans 50 feet and is very long and very tall. And then to have this tower sitting on top of that, this tower that weighed multiple tons, is a very technological feat. So to rebuild that is a good thing, to preserve that amazing technology, could say.
I see. Fair enough. Let's see if we can get one more in. Robert in Wichita, Kansas, listening on 96.7. You got to ask your question quickly if you'd like an answer.
Very good. It's wonderful to get to listen to the two of you gentlemen in this conversation. Duncan, I have a question. I'm just curious, how important is it to you, in your personal opinion, that all of the artists and artisans, craftsmen, are believers in order to be engaged in that work?
In the building of a church.
Space.
Okay.
Yes. So, of course, when we build a church, I think the last one that I did at Hillsdale College, somebody figured out, 500 people were involved. Some crazy number of people were involved. So, and as the owner or the architect, you don't have control over the individuals. What we look for are contractors, subcontractors, artisans, and artists who are sympathetic to what we're doing and have the love of what we're doing, which is a traditional church, as well as who appreciate the tradition. They respect it. And that tends to be the people that work on our projects, and we're fortunate to have that. Now, when it comes to things like art, paintings and sculpture, it makes a huge difference. That not only are they willing to do what you want, which is a Madonna and Child and multiple saints, but they believe in it and they can find a way to express that even better than you could imagine.
Robert, thank you very much for the question. Thanks to everybody who called. Our guest has been Duncan Stroik from Notre Dame University. Thank you very much.
And of course, it doesn't matter at all about the architect. Just hire any architect you want.
That's not right. I know that that's not true. And we got Jimmy Akin coming up. And if you, where to go if they want to find out more about your work? What is there a website they can go to?
Well, there is a website at stroik.com, and I'd also love it if people would look at the sacredarchitecture.org, which is our magazine, sacredarchitecture.org, if you're interested in this subject.
All right, we'll be right back with Jimmy Akin, open forum, and maybe an 8-year-old caller right after this. Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. And as promised, Jimmy Akin here with us for the second hour. And it's all open forum. Anybody can call with any question at all. 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin, of course, is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, the author of a whole bunch of things, books and blog posts and ebooks and all kinds of stuff, including The Bible is a Catholic Book and A Daily Defense, 365 Days Plus One to Becoming a Better Apologist. Senior apologist Jimmy Akin, thanks for being with us.
Host of Catholic Answers Live, Cyril Kellett. It's my pleasure.
I wonder if we're ever going to stop doing that. I don't know. I find that funny.
We don't do it all the time. It would get old then.
I guess it would.
Once in a while.
It's funny. I don't think it would get old to me.
Not the substance.
I guess so. Let me close the computer here. 888-318-7884, the number. Let me tell you how many lines are open. Well, I'll just say this. Good luck. Hope you call 888-318-7884. Tomorrow, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World will drop. Thousands and thousands of people look forward to Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World each week. What drops tomorrow?
About 70,000 people at least listen to it every week. It's
That's
a top
fantastic.
20. Yeah, it's consistently in the top 25 documentary podcasts in the U.S. on Apple Podcasts. But tomorrow is part 2 of our look at the 9/11 attacks, and we're going to be looking specifically. So last time we looked at how the damage was done. Was it just planes? Was it something other than planes? You know, what was involved in doing the damage? This time we're looking at who was responsible. So we're going to be looking into the 9/11 conspiracy itself. And yes, it was a conspiracy.
Oh, yeah.
By definition, a conspiracy is an agreement between 2 or more people to do something illegal. And killing thousands of innocent people is illegal. And this took more than one person to execute. So by definition, there was a conspiracy or an agreement among somebody to carry out the 9/11 attacks. And we're going to be looking at what the evidence says about who was involved, including whether it could have been an inside job.
Oh, so and you can get that at Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, and you can get to Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World by just typing in those words, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, and you'll come to it. I think 70,000 is fantastic, and 70,000 and growing.
Yeah, indeed. It's we have an upward trend in the listenership. People like sharing it with their friends and family, and so there's some regular growth happening.
Good work, Jimmy Akin. You ready to answer some questions?
Sure.
Because every single line filled up in about a minute. Michael in Ohio, listening on Annunciation Radio. You are first up with Jimmy today. Michael, go ahead with your question.
Thank you for taking my call. Our pastor has invited catechists from the neo-catechumenate way.
Oh, a neo-catechumenal way, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. To give sessions at our parish, I think with the intent of forming the groups at the end. But many people is kind of grumbling about it, and people are saying it's a cult. And I was wondering if Jimmy could respond, or how should one respond to somebody who says, I can't believe what the Father's doing, it's a cult.
Okay.
And then also, is there anything written from Catholic Answers that would be good to read about it?
Well, to take the last question first, because of course the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. I don't know if we have anything that Catholic Answers has written about it. If we do, it'll be on Catholic.com. Something to watch out for, though, is the status of the neo-catechumenal way has changed over the years. And so even if you do find something at Catholic.com, it may not be current. It may be something that was written some years ago when they had a different status. In terms of, is it a cult? Well, it's going to depend on what you mean. The term cult has more than one meaning. And one of the ways the term cult is used is a neutral way. When the term cult is used in a neutral sense, it refers to any devotion. And so since the neo-catechumenal way is a devotional system, it's a particular form of spirituality, it would be a cult in that sense, but so would saying the rosary, having Marian spirituality, having charismatic spirituality, having Dominican spirituality, having Tridentine, traditional Latin Mass spirituality. All of those are different forms of spirituality. And in the neutral sense, all of those are cults. So that's not really a particularly informative way of using the term because it applies to basically any kind of devotion. It sounds like, though, that the people you're talking to are not using it in a neutral sense, though. They're using it in a negative sense. And this is the most common use. The negative sense of the term cult is the most common way the term is used in contemporary English. If people say something's a cult, they mean it's a bad religious group or a religious group they don't like. The problem is that's all the term means. There is no objective definition for the term cult in standard English. There are no set of characteristics that can be applied to define exactly what a cult is. And so the term ends up just being an insult word. It's just an insult word that's applied to groups that people don't like and that they think are bad. And as a result, it's also not a very informative use of the term. All it tells us is the person making the accusation that someone is a cult doesn't like that group, but it doesn't tell us anything about them. And as a result, it sheds more heat than light. It gets discussions started of, is this a cult or not? And people get all riled up in this debate, but there's no real way of settling it one way or the other because the term is so subjective. And so I personally don't use the word cult in that way. And I recommend that other people not use the term cult in that way because it's just an insult. It doesn't really mean anything. If we step back and look at, I think what's better than calling someone a cult is naming the things you don't like. Because then you have some room for discussion. If you say, I think this group is bad because of this, or I don't like the group because of this, well, then you can discuss the merits of whatever it is you've named. You know, is that really the case? Is that really bad? Is that really, is it not so bad? You can discuss that, and because you've got an actual issue on the table rather than just using an insult word. In terms of the neo-catechumenal way, it has a history that goes back a while. It's one of the new religious movements that started in the Catholic Church in the last few decades. And there are grounds for criticism that have been raised. In fact, the Holy See itself had criticisms of the way the neo-catechumenal way was being run. The founder of the neo-catechumenal way had produced this large volume of catechetical literature, part of why they're called neo-catechumenal. They had this catechetical literature, and the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith said, hey, some of this stuff needs to be clarified. It is not all expressing the Catholic faith the way it needs to. Also, the neo-catechumenal way set up its own style of liturgy without approval from the Holy See, and so the Congregation for the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments got involved and said, hey, you need to do your liturgy within what the church's liturgical law allows. And so they developed a set of criteria. They said, look, here are some things you can do. Here are some things you can't do. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, meanwhile, reviewed their catechetical literature and said, here are the corrections you need to make. And they ultimately agreed to do all those things. And so today, the neo-catechumenal way is approved by the Vatican. And if the Vatican approves something, I'm not going to say it can't or shouldn't be in a parish, because it's been reviewed and it's been given a seal of approval by the Holy See itself. So it might or might not be to a given person's taste. They may or may not find that neo-catechumenal spirituality helps them. So it's up to them whether they want to be involved in it or not. But I wouldn't accuse them of being somehow illegitimate when the Vatican itself has approved them. What I would say is that human beings are human beings, and so they can make mistakes. And given that there has been a history of some doctrinal confusion with the neo-catechumenal way and of liturgical practices that shouldn't be done. I would say it's certainly sound to say, well, we want to keep an eye on this. We want to make sure that if it's happening in our parish, that it's happening in a way that's consistent with what the church has mandated for the neo-catechumenal way, that they're not falling back into bad habits and they're not being doctrinally confused and they're not doing liturgical things that they shouldn't. But as long as they're complying with what the Vatican said they needed to do, then I would say it's legitimate for them to be active in a parish just like any other devotional group.
And Michael, we'll leave it there because we got to take a break. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's open forum, 888-318-7884.
Call and ask Jimmy your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live is underwritten with support from Homeschool Connections. Teens and parents, Homeschool Connections invites you to the Life After High School online conference, October 7th to 8th, with information on Catholic universities, trade schools, and religious vocations, plus workshops. CatholicHomeschoolConference.com.
Do you have a question but prefer to ask it privately? Catholic Questions can help. Go to CatholicQuestions.com to ask your question online, email us, drop us a letter, or give us a call. Longtime Catholic Answers Live apologist and author Jim Blackburn or another Catholic Questions apologist will be happy to assist you. Catholic Questions proudly supports Catholic Answers Live, so visit us at CatholicQuestions.com today. That's CatholicQuestions.com.
The people who call More to Life are often hurting so much. I just want to reach through the radio and hug them. I want them to know how loved they are and how much God wants to fill their hearts with His healing grace and His deep desire to completely transform the life of anyone who's open to the movement of His Holy Spirit.
More to Life with Dr. Greg and Lisa Popcak. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Killett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest, and I'm feeling better because I've been worried about Sarah, who called yesterday at the end of the show, and we couldn't take her call because I kind of messed up the clock on Sarah, and now Sarah did just what I asked her to do. She called back. Sarah, are you there with us?
Yes.
Thank you very much for calling us back. I appreciate you waiting. Okay. Are you ready with your question for Mr. Akin?
Mm-hmm.
All right, go ahead with your question.
Why can't girls be priests?
Okay. In the ancient world, there actually were women who were priests. There were priestesses in many different religions in the ancient world. But Jesus, in setting up his church, chose not to have any women be Christian priests. He only chose the apostles to be his initial priests, and they were all men. It has nothing to do with who's the best person, because his mom, Mary, is the best person. You know, she's sinless, she's perfect as a human being, and so he didn't pick people to be priests based on how good they were. And so women can be just as good as men, they can be just as holy as men, but Jesus, for one reason or another, chose to only pick men to be priests. And we can speculate on why that is. We can try to figure out why he might have done that. But the fact is, that is what he did. And so the church has always understood that it needs to honor Jesus' decision, that the church doesn't have the ability to just do its own thing and go contrary to what Jesus did. In terms of why he might have done this, people have thought about it, and one of the ideas they've suggested is that it has to do with the differences between men and women in terms of giving life. Women are able to do something that no man can do. They can be mother, give life to their children in a way that men simply cannot do. Priests, however, are spiritual fathers. They give spiritual life. And so some people have suggested that maybe the reason Jesus chose to have men as his priests is because it kind of balances things. Women get to be spiritual mothers. Women get to be physical mothers, which is something no man can do. And so men get to be spiritual fathers, and it kind of balances things. And that's been one of the ideas that people have proposed. Maybe that's why Jesus made this choice. But regardless of why he made the choice, the church has said we need to accept Jesus's choice and we need to honor it.
Okay, Sarah? Do we still have Sarah there with us? Hang on. Maybe I'm not. Sarah, I'm sorry. We were, that was us. We couldn't hear you. Is that answer okay for you, Sarah?
Yeah.
Okay, good. You know what, Sarah? You were so nice and you called back a second day, and I would like to send you a book. We have a graphic novel called The Truth Is Out There, and a lot of people really like this. It's got great pictures in it. If you would like it, you got to ask, is your mom or dad there with you?
No.
Oh, is there an adult there with you?
No.
Oh, okay. Sarah, I'll tell you what. I want to send you that book, but I can't have Sarah give us her address if there's no adult there. All right. I'm going to let you talk with Thomas, and Thomas is going to figure out a way that we can get a book to you. Maybe we can send it to your parish. Hang on. Thomas, would you please help Sarah? Thank you very, very much. Our number is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. That was nice that Sarah called back again. Let's go to Chris in Miami listening on TuneIn Radio. Chris, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Oh, man. Jimmy Akin, Cy Kellett, you guys are awesome. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and my family and I are also part of this 70,000 plus listeners of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. So awesome.
You are a very wise man.
My question is this. Yeah. My question is this. I know how in the Old Testament we see instruction given to the priesthood with regard to their form of dress, like fabric, colors, jewels, and that sort of thing. But how do we go from those instructions and descriptions to the modern day things we see in Catholic churches today? I know that there can be different architectural types, like traditional, modern, and stuff, but there are things that you see in all churches, like the colors, fabrics worn by the priests, the positioning of the altar, stations of the cross being displayed. All the shapes and colors have a meaning and a detail. So I wanted to know, where do we get those from?
Okay. Well, it's true that God did prescribe for the people of Israel that their priests wear a certain kind of dress, and that they design their worship space, which initially was called the tabernacle and later the temple when they made it a permanent structure. He did give instructions for how those were to be made, and as God's people before the time of Christ, that's what they needed to do. But when Christ came, he, as St. Paul says, was the end of the Jewish law. And so as a result, Christians did not feel bound to imitate those things. And in fact, Christians initially, being a small minority that principally came from the poor and the middle class, they didn't have a lot of money, and so they couldn't have afforded to build, magnificent buildings or have fancy clothing for their priests. And so they looked a lot. They originally met in just ordinary houses, and they dressed the way people ordinarily dressed in their cultures, whether they were Jewish or Greek or Roman or whatever they may have been. And then over the course of time, as Christians became larger as a group and they had more resources available, then they could afford to upgrade the worship spaces they were using. So they started building actual church buildings, and they started improving the quality of the clothing that priests could wear and things like that. And it grew organically over time. And different things have different origins. The Stations of the Cross you mentioned, for example, are something that came in the late Middle Ages, because what happened was people would go on, in the high Middle Ages, they'd go on crusades over to Jerusalem, and they would walk the way of the cross in Jerusalem with the actual sites, or where it was commemorated, okay, Jesus fell here, and this is where Jesus was crucified, and they saw those sites, and then they came back from the Crusades, and to help other people share in that experience, they made Stations of the Cross, so that even if you couldn't go to Jerusalem and walk the actual way of the cross, you could walk the Stations of the Cross and kind of spiritually participate in that journey. And there's a rich history of how different things came to be part of Christian worship, whether it's clothing or symbols in church or things like that. There's no concise way to say we got them all from here, because they developed over the course of time, and culture just grows organically over time. And that's what happened with Christian worship culture. There are some books that you might want to check out for more information. There are various dictionaries of the liturgy that you could find that would give you history of particular garments that a priest would wear. Also, there's a book, or a two-volume book, called Mass of the Modern Roman Rite, or Mass of the Roman Rite, by a scholar named Joseph Jungmann, Jungman, and there may be two N's on the end of it, but Mass of the Roman Rite by Joseph Jungmann. And there are also histories of other Catholic rites of Mass, but if you want to track down the origin of a particular symbol, it's technical resource works like that or dictionaries of the liturgy that you would want to consult.
Chris, thank you very, very much. I'm going to keep moving. We'll go to Shannon in Kansas, watching on YouTube. Shannon, go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hi. My question has to deal with, I see a chiropractor, and he uses muscle testing, I guess also known as applied kinesiology. And to kind of get at the root of maybe some emotional problems that is causing physical pain. And I was just wondering if that was okay or not with the Catholic Church.
Okay.
And I guess I should add that he is Catholic, this doctor.
Okay.
I don't know. That's my question.
So is he trying to lay anything spiritual or religious over this practice, or is he just saying, I'm going to test your muscles and that may let me know something about your psychology?
Yeah, the second thing that you said.
The second. Okay. So he's not trying to attribute any religious significance to this act. He's discussing it purely in terms of science, like kinesiology, which has to do with motion in your muscles, and psychology. Now, that means that there's nothing in principle that's wrong about this. He's not importing any non-Christian ideas of a religious nature into this. And so the church would look at this like any other proposed therapy and say, well, it checks out on the religious front because no false religion is being introduced here, but it's still got to pass muster on the scientific front. Does reason actually support the claims of this form of therapy? And there's a dispute about this. Chiropractic medicine itself is something there's a dispute about. Both chiropractic and applied kinesiology are considered alternative medicines, so they haven't been accepted by mainstream traditional medicine. That doesn't mean they're automatically useless, but it also doesn't mean that they've been proved to be useful to the satisfaction of most doctors. So I would say if you get benefit from this, then it's fine to go ahead and use it. But if you find you're not getting any benefit from this, then don't use it. In terms of if you do get benefit, why would that benefit happen? Well, it could happen because there is some way to deduce people's psychological state by testing their muscles. On the other hand, there may not be a way to deduce someone's psychological state by testing their muscles, but it may be the placebo effect. The mere fact you're going through this procedure could give you comfort and allow you to heal yourself, in essence. That's what the placebo effect is. So if it has a benefit, then it could be used. If it doesn't have a benefit, then I would say don't waste my money on it. One thing I would do is be careful about attributing too much significance to it. It's not obvious how one could deduce a psychological state from muscles other than, wow, your muscles are really tense. You must be emotionally tense. But, you could kind of deduce that from someone's muscles maybe. But if it's like your muscles are responding this way and that means you must have been abused as a child, well, that's a completely different claim. So I would say be cautious, but those are the principles I would apply.
Thanks very much. Appreciate the call. Shannon, we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin, 888-318-7884.
Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers is doing it again. We're holding our 7th annual Apologetics Conference this September in beautiful San Diego, California, and we'd like to see you there. Join us September 23rd to 26th for a lively and inspiring conference with an all-star lineup of speakers guaranteed to jumpstart your faith. It's a great chance to meet all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and very special guests as we spend 4 days talking about worshiping and adoring our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This is where it all begins. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us this September for a conference that is sure to ignite, inspire, and inform your faith. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Hi, this is Janet Williams. You don't have to be a woman to enjoy Women of Grace tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern here on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
I dig it. A little bit of groovy music. Thanks, Darren. All right, feeling groovy. Jimmy Akin here. Thursday, open forum. All good. You can call with any question you want, 888-318-7884. Up next is Zelly in Michigan, listening on Catholic.com. Zelly, are you there with us?
Yes, I am. I wanted to say thank you so much for taking my call. My question is, how can we believe that the Eucharist is truly Christ's body if a body is inherently physical? I want to just further specify what exactly I'm looking for. Is that the only part of us that isn't physical is our spirit, but we don't say that Christ is only spiritually present. So how do we reconcile that?
All right.
So the fact that the difficulty here has to do with the word physical. It means different things, and it's true that our bodies are physical, but they I'm trying to avoid a discussion of Greek, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to avoid it. So let me just go ahead and do it. The Greek word for physical, physis, means natural. So something is physical if it's natural. And Christ's natural body is present in the Eucharist. But in ordinary life, see a lot of cases where a natural body or a physical body is present in more than one place at a time. However, there's nothing in principle that would stop God from taking a natural body or a physical body and making it present in 2 places or 3 places or as many places as God chooses. How can we understand that? Well, a principle that I often use in thinking about miracles is if I can think of a way that the effect of a miracle could be accomplished, then God knows at least that way. He probably knows all kinds of other ways, including ones I can't even imagine. But if I can think of at least one way it could happen, that shows that this miracle is possible, and thus God knows how to do it. In the case of how could a natural body or a physical object be present in more than one place at a time, we have a special advantage in that we're living in the 21st century. Because about 100 years ago, Albert Einstein figured out that the way people were understanding space and time was not fully correct. People had always assumed that space and time are absolutes, that space is just the way it is. You can't fold it or bend it or distort it or anything like that. And similarly, time is just the way time is. It always progresses at the same rate. It never gets faster or slower or anything like that. And what Einstein was able to show is that actually space and time can be bent. They can take other shapes besides the ones that we naturally think of. And so, as a result, it's possible for space to be bent in such a way that a single physical object could be in more than one place. If you want a way to think about that, imagine taking a piece of paper, which will represent space, and then maybe put a drop of food color on one side of the top of the paper, and then fold the paper together so that that drop of food color is now in 2 places at once. It's in one part of the sheet, but because you folded the sheet, it's also at another part of the sheet where the 2 sides make contact with each other. And then if you unfold the piece of paper, you'll see, yeah, I've got food color in both of these places. Well, since you can fold a piece of paper so that a single drop of food color is in more than one place on the paper when you folded it together, God can fold space in a way that makes a single physical body, like that drop of food color or Jesus's body or anything else, present in more than one place. And he could do even more complex folding that would allow a single physical object to be in even more places than that. So if I can think of how we can accomplish the effect of this miracle just using Albert Einstein's insights, then God knows at least that way of doing it, and probably lots of other ways. I don't know which way God is doing it, but if God tells me this is what I'm doing, I'm making this natural physical body appear in more than one place at a time, then I can believe God that that's what he's doing, even if I don't know which particular means he's using to cause that to happen.
Okay, Zelly?
I think so. I think that helps a lot. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Very, very good. Thank you for the call. I'm going to go to Kyle in, oh man, we got a lot of calls from here lately. Going to Kyle in New York City. New York City. Watching on YouTube. Go ahead, Kyle.
Hi, gentlemen. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Very well. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. I'm going to try to make this quick and concise. I was talking with one of my dear friends who lives in Latin America, in the country of Colombia, and he is married and has a child with his wife, but they have a bit of an abnormal situation. Both are practicing very faithful Catholics, but they planned to do their wedding in the church, but the pandemic hit, of course, and the government of Colombia actually closed not only everything, but including churches for the good part of a year. It was pretty controversial. So what they said was anybody who needs to get married, in their case that they did because the wife was from a different country in Latin America and they had a child, they could do so in a notary. So they could get the visa and stay together as a family. My question is, in this particular case, they're now planning their wedding in the church. They're getting everything squared away. During this time and up until now, could they still receive the sacraments and or confession, or is that not a possibility considering that they're, acting as a family, not being married in the church? The reason I asked this is because we were talking about this together, and it seemed to me that this was a bit of an extenuating circumstance. It wasn't as if they were just flippantly choosing not to get married in the church. So I wasn't sure if that mitigated a bit of the circumstances.
All right, Jimmy?
Okay. So the reason that Catholics need to get married in the church is because church law requires Catholics to either get married in the church or get a dispensation to have a non-Catholic marriage or be in special circumstances. And it's kind of like the church is kind of like a state in this regard. If you're a member of a particular country, you need to observe that country's marriage laws. So if you're a member of the church, you need to observe the church's marriage laws. But the church's marriage laws include an exception for when people cannot approach a priest or a deacon or otherwise take care of the formalities needed in order to have a church wedding. And in canon law, the standard interpretation of that is actually if it's not possible for 30 days, you could have a marriage that's non-Catholic. And so given the pandemic situation, if they got married after their country closed all the churches and stopped them from being able to get married in the church, then if that condition was going to go on for an extended period of time, which obviously it was, then canon law itself would allow them to approach a notary and be married that way. So based on the fact pattern you described, I would assume that they are validly married. If they want to go on and have a wedding in the church too, that's great. That's a great thing to do. But they would already be validly married, and so as a result, the fact they're living as husband and wife would not prevent them from going to confession or receiving the Eucharist or participating in the other sacraments, because they're validly married husband and wife, at least based on the fact pattern you've described.
Wow, that one worked out pretty good, huh, Kyle?
Yeah, may I ask a very quick follow-up, or do we not have time for that?
For a very quick one, we do.
Yeah, for that dispensation you mentioned, does there need to be anything formal about that, or is it just recognized as the situation they have the dispensation automatically?
It's not a dispensation. It's just the way the law is written. Catholics are not required to observe the Catholic form of marriage when it's not possible to obtain a Catholic marriage for an extended period. And that's described in the Code of Canon Law itself. So if you want more information about that, or if you want to look up the text so you can provide it to your friend, the Code of Canon Law is on the Vatican website. I would Google Vatican.va, that's the Vatican website, and Code of Canon Law. It'll come up, and then you want to look in the section under matrimony on the form of matrimony.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks very much. We got to go to a break. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's open forum. Have you heard about the great new Catholic Answers Rewards program? It's our new program at shop.catholic.com, where pretty much everything you do earns you points, and you can cash them in for great Catholic resources. You get points every time you shop, when you sign up for an account, do a review, refer a friend. There's 10 different ways to earn points, and it's so easy. Just visit shop.catholic.com/rewards today and get started. That's shop.catholic.com/rewards.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Go forth and preach the good news. It's not just a suggestion. If you want to take more seriously the command of Jesus to share the gospel with those around you, consider joining St. Paul Street Evangelization. It's a grassroots organization that brings the Catholic faith to the streets in a non-confrontational way. Visit our website, www.streetevangelization.com, to learn more. And don't forget to like us on Facebook. It's time to do our part.
He is only one of 4 popes honored as the Great.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Leo I was pope at a time when Roman civilization was being overrun by barbarian armies. He stood as a light in the darkness and even saved the city of Rome from destruction by Attila and the Huns. Leo died in 461.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Open Forum. Jimmy Akin, our guest, just across the border from us in Mexicali, Mexico. Francisco, listening on 95.7 FM. Francisco, thank you very much for the call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi. Congratulations for the show.
Thank you.
What is more important, the civil marriage or church marriage?
Well, it depends on what you want to accomplish by having a civil marriage or a church marriage. If you want to have, the right to inherit from your spouse when they die, well, then you need a civil marriage for that. And if your church doesn't, if your state does not recognize church marriages, well, then, a civil marriage would be more important than a church marriage for purposes of inheritance rights. But if you want the right to engage in sexual intercourse with your spouse, you need a church marriage if you're a Catholic, or it needs to be a special circumstance where you're not required to have a church marriage, because you need to be validly married with your spouse in God's eyes. And if you're a Catholic, under most circumstances, you need to have a Catholic wedding in order to be validly married in God's eyes. And from the broader perspective, if we think about the fact that marriage between two Christians is a sacrament, and that God gives us his grace through that sacrament, and those graces will help us not only live as spouses in this life, but also help us get to heaven, then in terms of the benefits you're going to get from having a church marriage, they well exceed the value of a civil marriage that only has to do with the things of this life. So it's going to depend on the purpose, but fundamentally, you want to be right with God, and if you're a Catholic, that means most of the time you're going to need to be having a church marriage.
I see. Is civil marriage valid in God's sight?
Not if you're a Catholic under most circumstances. If you're a citizen of the Catholic Church, you need to obey the Catholic Church's marriage laws, and most of the time that means that you need to have a Catholic marriage. If you say, I don't care, I'm going to get married outside the church even though I don't have a good reason, well, then it's not going to be valid. You will not be married in God's eyes. You'll be two people sleeping together.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Francisco.
No problem.
Thanks very, very much.
By the way, I wanted to add, I was able to look up the specific canon I wanted to refer our previous caller to, which was also on the subject of marriage. It's Canon 1116. Canon 1116, and it provides that it is possible for a Catholic to be able to enter into a marriage contract without observing the Catholic form if it can't be done without grave inconvenience, like when the state says all of your churches are closed, all your base are belong to us, and the situation will continue for a month.
Yeah, okay.
So Canon 1116.
All right. Jimmy Akin, our guest. It's open forum. Let's see who we got next here. Where am I going? We got Lee in Colorado listening to EWTN on Sirius XM Satellite Radio, Channel 130. Lee, thank you very much for the call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Yes, I did have a question, but...
Good. That's what we're here for.
I was... I wanted to comment, though, if you would allow me. The young lady who had gone to the chiropractor for working emotional work or whatever it was, I am a Catholic and a practicing chiropractor of 37 years, and I would perhaps just like to clear up some things about these types of treatments.
Lee, actually, we're getting close to the end of the show, and I tried to give as neutral and balanced an answer as I could without taking sides on that issue. If we're getting into details that have to do with, is this practice efficacious or not efficacious? What are the medical what's the evidence for the medical benefit of a particular therapy? That's really getting us beyond what the subject matter of this show is. So I tried to answer in as neutral a way as I can, but if we open it up to comments from people of different perspectives, and one person says, well, I think the scientific evidence is this, and I think the medical evidence is this, then we're going to have to let other people come on and say, well, I think it's this, and I think it's this other thing.
And we're not qualified to evaluate it.
Yeah, it's not really a medical debate show.
You probably would find my original question more intriguing.
All right, let's intriguing. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. God, who created the heavens and the earth and us, knowing all things from beyond time, I wonder, why did God create the world, the heavens and the earth, and mankind, knowing that things would turn out as they've turned out? How man has just become a scourge of the universe. Why would he have created us, but knowing all this is going to happen?
Okay, I would have a somewhat more positive evaluation of man. I don't think man is a scourge of the universe. I think that humans are flawed, but fundamentally we're created in the image of God, and even though that image has been disfigured by sin, human beings are still good. They're still valuable. Jesus himself, for example, says that we're worth many sparrows, or a multitude of sparrows, where we have intrinsic value that comes to us from God. And so I'd have a more positive view of humanity, at least in terms of how I'd express it. In terms of why would God create the world knowing that it's going to involve things like sin and suffering, this is a rich question. In fact, I gave a talk a few years ago called The Problem of Evil, which deals exactly with this question. And Cy, since Lee is here in the United States, maybe we can send him a copy of my talk, The Problem of Evil, because it'll go into more detail than I can. Here, the fundamental reason is, as the Catechism states, God would not allow any evil, either physical evil like pain or moral evil like sin. He would not allow any evil unless he had a way to bring a good out of it. And so the fact that God will ultimately bring about a greater good as a result of allowing these evils is something that makes them livable. If I come to you as a chiropractor, I'm having back pain, and you're going to do an adjustment on me, maybe that adjustment's going to hurt a little bit in the moment you do it. And I know they do because I've gone to chiropractors, but that doesn't stop me from going to chiropractors, because I know the good that's going to come out of that. Even if I have this little momentary pain, there's a greater good that's going to come out of it. And I'm willing to have the momentary pain in order to have the greater good of having my back in alignment so that I'm not constantly hurting from that. And in the same way, it's rational for us as humans to look at the situation of the world and say, yes, there's sin, yes, there's suffering, but I can put up with those, I can tolerate those, as long as God will ultimately bring about a greater good.
Lee, I'm going to try to get as many as I can on before we have to go, so thank you very, very much for the call and for your understanding. We're going to go to Ryan in Boston, Massachusetts, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Go ahead, Ryan, with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, guys. How you doing? So I just want to know, on the Church Fathers, I just want a general, deeper understanding of my Catholic faith, and what would be a good starting point. I've read the Ignatius letters and the first part, the part one of the catechism. I'm just looking for more.
Okay. I would suggest a book that I happen to write called The Fathers Know Best. It's organized by topic, so you can look at what the Church Fathers had to say on particular topics like baptism or the Eucharist or other aspects of the Catholic faith. And it's also organized chronologically. So you start with the earliest references and then you move through history and see how their teaching progressed on that particular topic. So it covers like 50 topics. So I would recommend The Fathers Know Best. It also has introductions to the individual fathers, who they were, when they lived, where they lived, what was going on in their time, that kind of stuff.
Ryan, you can get it at shop.catholic.com, or I can send it to you free. What would you prefer?
I'll buy it. I'll
What?
support you guys. No worries.
I wasn't expecting
Awesome.
that.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right. Oh, also, are you interested in the Brooklyn Bridge? No, just kidding, Ryan. Thank you. That's very nice of you to support us that way. Let's go to, I'm going to try to get everybody on if I can. Caleb in Lincoln, Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. You are up next, Caleb. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Thank you, Jimmy. My understanding is that the Catholic Church does not endorse supersessionism. So my question is, or what I'm having trouble understanding is, how can adherents of Catholicism and Judaism both be considered people of God without that undercutting the Catholic Church in its role as the avenue of salvation?
Could you repeat the question? I wanted to make sure I caught all of it.
Yeah. So my understanding is the Catholic Church does not endorse supersessionism. So with
Correct.
that knowledge, I am having trouble understanding how both adherents of Catholicism and Judaism can both be considered God's people without that undercutting the Catholic Church as its role as the
Okay.
avenue of salvation.
So what it means to be God's people can mean more than one thing. What it means to be God's people in a fundamental sense means God has a special relationship with you. But that special relationship does not mean you're automatically going to be saved in the eternal sense. You're not automatically going to end up going to heaven. And so it's possible both for Jews and Gentiles to have a special relationship with God without that meaning that they're automatically going to go to heaven. So Jewish people need to, ordinarily, they need to believe in their Messiah, in Jesus of Nazareth, and receive salvation through him. God has ways of sharing salvation through Jesus with non-Christians, even if they're innocently ignorant of this. But ordinarily, someone needs to have faith in Jesus. That doesn't mean that Jewish people don't have a special relationship with God on the basis of the covenants he made with their forefathers. They do, but that doesn't mean they're automatically saved if they were to knowingly and deliberately reject Jesus. In the same way, if someone was a Catholic and then turned their back on Jesus, well, they still have a relationship with God, but it's not a saving relationship if they're knowingly and deliberately rejecting Jesus. So, basic answer, being one of God's people, whether you're a Jew or a Gentile, does mean you have a special relationship with God, but it doesn't mean you will be going to heaven if you consciously, knowingly, and deliberately reject Jesus in favor of a life of living apart from God.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Caleb. Appreciate it. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Jimmy, also the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Tomorrow, it will be the part 2 of the September 11th, 2001 kind of retrospective. And this includes some audio that many people may not have heard.
No, that was the first part.
Oh, the first part
The second
includes the
part,
audio.
we're focusing on the conspiracy.
Okay. So if you haven't heard the first part, you can do that. The second part, the conspiracy. You're comfortable with that word conspiracy. This really was a conspiracy.
Absolutely. It involved 2 or more people agreeing to do something illegal. So by definition, it was a conspiracy.
You can catch Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World every Friday morning. Just type in Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. 70,000 other people every week are checking it out. You should be too. Jimmy, thanks very, very much. Appreciate the hour.
My pleasure. Likewise.
And what do we? We've got Joe Heschmeyer tomorrow. Okay, so Joe's still in town. You may know this. Our colleague Joe Heschmeyer in town this week, so he'll be on with us 2 hours tomorrow. We'll see you then, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.